Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Sabrina here, and I am here with a cool video. It's something different, and it's the first time I'm ever doing this. I am recording a full-on illustration in Photoshop. I'm just going to talk through it, and I will explain the idea and inspiration behind this illustration. Basically, over here, I brought in this super rough scribbly sketch that I did in Procreate. I am drawing a friend's boyfriend over here, and I drew it in Rick and Morty style. And I liked the face a lot and how I did the doodle in Procreate, so I just took this really crappy doodle and then I brought it into Photoshop, and I already had an idea in mind to have a full frontal view of him in a different pose, so I just took that sketch just for reference because I knew I wanted to use the size and then also that face for later. So over here I am using a Photoshop pencil brush, and I am literally scribbling the first initial layout sketch. Usually when I am trying to get my first initial layout sketch, it's so messy. Like, it looks like a kindergartner drew it or something. And it's funny because I thought this wasn't normal. I thought drawings have to look amazing right off the bat, because for the longest time that's all you see online, is people's amazing drawings. And then I've also seen people doodle right in front of me before, and they're just really good. They have great mileage. But as time has gone on, or as years have gone by, I have seen people upload time-lapse drawings or their process, and I notice I'm not the only one who draws like this in the beginning stages of an illustration. But basically, I am just constantly going over and over and over, layer by layer by layer in passes, just until I'm happy with where my sketches are going, and you'll see that they kind of slowly get more and more defined. I'm a bit rusty. It's been a while since I've worked on Rick and Morty, so it's a little, I'm trying to get a feel for the style again. I did design the original spiritual leader Rick. I was requested to do my friend's boyfriend in that same style and kind of something similar, to have him in a like spiritual meditation pose. So I tried changing up the pose and clothing in a way where I'm not ripping it off completely off of Rick from that one design. Also, in this file, I tried my best to kind of crop out the original design because I did kind of compare proportions to the original Rick. But since I don't own any of the Rick and Morty artwork, it is owned by Adult Swim. I tried my best to crop it out of this video because I don't know how legal terms wise, I don't know what's allowed and what's not to put in. But anyways, so I tried to compare the proportions, and over here you'll see me just move things around, make things bigger, make things smaller. And throughout this video, you'll notice I do make cheats a lot, especially since this is a full frontal pose. I like to copy and paste if it's symmetrical. And this design is symmetrical. I made it like that on purpose, so I didn't have to take too long on it and do too much work. My intention was to do a simple graphic, so that way my friend's boyfriend could potentially get it printed onto a shirt or whatever he wants to print it on. And I did create this file in CMYK mode for printing. It is 11 by 17. I always do 300 dpi. I think I crop it down later to 8.5 by 11. but I started off big because I don't know. I think 11 by 17 is a good standard size. I think that's the standard size page that we actually work with on the show, Rick and Morty. So I just kind of worked with what I was comfortable with and what I knew. A couple tips for people who are fairly overwhelmed with starting out in illustration. First, start out with the intention of just sketching out your composition and knowing that it's not the final product yet, and you're just kind of sketching out different layouts of how you want to compose your composition, I guess, like, how do you want to position things? So for example, for this one, I actually sketched out some thumbnail sketches beforehand in Procreate of different poses, or like, over here you see the hand and the other 6 chakra balls or spheres or whatever. I actually sketched that idea out prior to this, so I did have an idea of how I wanted him to be posed and what I wanted it all to look like. And it does help to sometimes put some color onto the canvas first, so you're not just working in just black and white if you are super intimidated by just a blank canvas. And what I also always encourage is to draw small. It helps when you draw small and think of everything on a large scale, like simplify things. And then eventually, as you keep doing passes over and over and over, you'll notice that your drawing slowly gets bigger because you start to fit in more detail. So that's what ends up happening with my drawings. They start out small, and then I end up like blowing them up a little bit, just to get more detail in. Or like you saw before, my face just the face that I drew here kept getting more and more and more and more defined. Over here, I'm going through one quick pass before I start to clean it. So first I do a layout sketch, then I do like a semi-rough sketch, and then I like to do a ready to clean sketch. I know on the show in Rick and Morty, this is how we would actually work. So this is how we would prepare for cleanup. So that way, whoever was looking at the artwork would have an idea of what it would look like close to clean, and they can approve it whether it's ready to be cleaned or not. So what I did just before this, before I do this little circle here, this ellipse with the ellipse tool, by accident I merged that sketch onto the same layer as my final ready to clean sketch. So I actually selected everything that was grayscale and deleted it because I merged it on accident. I'm not organized when I'm in a hurry with my layers, but I highly recommend that you organize yourself with your layers and lock any layers that you are not using, because sometimes I have a tendency to merge layers. So yes, highly recommend that. If you catch anything interesting in this tutorial and you feel like I'm going too fast or this thing is too fast, let me know. Ask questions down below in the comments below on how I do certain things, or if you want me to make a video on any of these steps or shortcuts that I do or anything, because I know sometimes some people have no idea about Photoshop shortcuts or Photoshop itself in general. I've been using Photoshop since I was since I was in high school. So I know the program very well, and I utilize all tricks a lot. Like over here, see, I'm flipping and copying and pasting pretty much. I do not consider that cheating. I hate when people say that's cheating. Like, really, what is cheating? Is there rules in art? No, there isn't. Rules are meant to be broken. Also, when you work in production on a animated TV show, it actually helps to cheat when necessary, because you don't have that much time because of deadlines. You'll notice over here, it's been a while since I've cleaned in this style, so you'll see that I'll draw lines a lot and then undo them. I switch back and forth between just drawing by hand and also using the pen tool for cleaner long lines. On the show, we don't really use the pen tool much because the wobbly hand stroke is actually encouraged. But just for this illustration, I like to keep it fairly clean, so I am just trying to do whatever I can to make it fairly clean. In the show, there is no pressure sensitivity for the brushes. We do taper some lines here and there, like you can see under his eyes, those lines are tapered, but the consistency or the overall line weight of the line is consistent, and we use a hard brush, and that way everything stays fairly even. I find cleaning fairly therapeutic. This is actually usually my favorite part of any drawing or illustration or job. Whenever I had to clean anything on Rick and Morty, or I would finish drawing a sketch or something and I had to clean it, I would get very excited because these are times where my brain doesn't focus as much. It kind of just goes on autopilot, and I often put something on the other screen and I watch something on Netflix or YouTube or Hulu or any of that stuff. Right now, my job on the current show that I'm working on is actually just doing cleanup. So I'm actually in love with this job at the moment. Sometimes it's fun to take a break from the design work for me personally, so I can actually use my creative energy for stuff like this outside of work. There are jobs like this where you literally just have to clean up artwork, depending on the company. Rick and Morty, they actually combine tasks, so my job isn't just cleanup work. I actually do turnarounds and a little bit of design work. So I'm not just a cleanup artist, but I know that places like Cartoon Network, and I think Nickelodeon too, I know that they do have a cleanup artist on their shows, and that's all they do is clean up, and it's either in Illustrator or it's in Photoshop, depending on what they're looking for. Illustrator has vector lines, and I think they're more graphic and cleaner to work with. Photoshop is usually when shows try to go for a more less super clean feel to it. Like, for example, the show that I'm working on right now, we work in Photoshop, so we don't really focus on like super graphic vector lines or anything. And same with Rick and Morty. They like that little wobbliness, like I said earlier, to the lines, so I don't always focus on making the lines super perfect. So yeah. By the way, let me let me know, you guys, if you actually want to see an illustration in the future in real time, because I was thinking maybe it would be cool to actually explain these things as I go and like what I'm doing move for move, and then I can just like speed through when I'm like currently working on something like this. I'm basically talking over me just cleaning stuff, but yeah, let me know if you would want to see something like that. You'll notice every now and then that I will just select a certain spot of this design and then copy and paste it, or flip it to the other side. The reason why I do this instead of like doing half of the drawing and then flipping the entire half of the drawing to the other side is because I notice when I do like just certain body parts or certain lines here and there, when I do it individually, I notice it gives the drawing a little bit more of an organic feel, because in reality we aren't perfectly symmetrical, and when things are perfectly symmetrical in drawings or designs, it actually looks a little like weird and like, what's that word? What's that word? Like uncanny valley or I forgot the term, but basically it just looks really off to the human eye because we're not used to seeing perfect symmetry in anything. I mean, there is probably perfect symmetry in things, but like if they're designed that way. But as far as, you know, humans go, or even especially in Rick and Morty, you'll notice that like eyes are never perfectly symmetrical. Like one size is always bigger than the other, or it's not always, like just most of the time. So I'm doing that just to make sure everything stays fairly organic, I guess. And you also want to remember that when you're cleaning, you don't always have to think that every line has to be final. Sometimes you'll see me like actually not follow the initial sketch too, because there's certain areas where I'm like, nah, I think this needs to be bigger, or this line needs to be pushed out more, yada yada yada. For the hand over here, I'm using the pen tool because these are really long, broad lines. And sometimes it's just easier to use the pen tool for lines like this because it's just smoother. It takes a bit longer to use your hand to do these lines. You can do it, but I personally get really frustrated with it. So this technique is just faster for me. Same with those spheres. I like to just use ellipses sometimes because spheres, try drawing a sphere by hand. It's really annoying, especially digitally. Like, you just try it and you'll see what I mean. It's not fun. I am working on a Cintiq. I have a Cintiq at home, so in case anybody's wondering on how I'm doing this, I forgot how big my Cintiq is. I think I have like the 22 inch or something, and it's the touchscreen one, but I turned the touchscreen mode off. I don't know. Oh, anyways, over here for the coloring part, since my initial sketch has been cleaned up and my lines are done, I put my lines at the top, and then underneath I start coloring. I actually have a picture off to the corner that you can't see because, again, legal reasons. I took a picture from Rick and Morty, and it had an African American character in it, and I just kind of used the eyedropper tool to swatch the colors of the skin and such. I'm not a colorist, so I will use other images for inspiration or reference for color. So over here I'm working with his skin, and my friend's boyfriend has like a little bit more of a warm tone to his skin rather than a cool tone that you saw just earlier, so I tweaked it a bit. When I color and I tweak, I sometimes go to the adjustments in the Photoshop image tab, or I'll go to the hue and saturation or the color balance, and I'll kind of like fiddle through those dials or levels and to figure out which color I want. I do separate everything into layers with colors first. Like, for example, I did the skin, and then on another layer I did the hair. If you want to fill in things really fast, what I do is I use the magic wand tool, and I go to the lines layer. I select the area with the wand tool, the magic wand tool, or whatever, the quick selection tool, and then you'll see those marquee lines, the dotted ants. Select that area, and then I go back to the layer that I'm going to color on with those marquee ants still on, and then I get the paint bucket tool and paint and fill that area in, or I click Alt Delete, which is a shortcut for the paint bucket tool, and it fills in that whole area, but it leaves like a little bit of a white a little bit of a clear space between your selection and the rest of the area. So you'll see me, like, when I do fill in anything, I kind of go in around all the outer edges along the black lines, and I paint in those areas. but at least I didn't have to fill it all in by hand. So that's a quick little trick that I like to do when I fill in an entire area, for this style at least. This is a flat style, so. Again, when you are working with multiple layers, at some point, when I get overwhelmed, I like to start labeling things, because eventually you'll see why later in the next step, why it's so important to label everything, because it's just quicker and easier to find exactly what you're looking for, rather than, you know, turning on and off each layer to see if that's the one that you're looking for. So that helps. Coloring does take quite a bit because it's a lot of tweaking as I go, or as you go. So it's definitely a skill. Over here, I am actually, for shadows, I am just doing one layer for all shadows. I am painting in dark blue, and I am putting it on multiply. And that way, whatever I'm drawing over, it's already like choosing the appropriate shadow tone for like either the skin or the hair or the lips or whatever. What I used to do, or usually do, is I actually go layer by layer, like get the hair, get the skin, get each part, and I would actually like pick and choose my shadow colors, and then I would clip those shadows to the layer of what I'm painting over. But just for time's sake, I just did one shadow layer, and I did clip it. You can see in the layers that I did clip this layer to the entire group of all the layers. I grouped all the layers of color together, and I clipped this on top and put it on multiply. Clipping just makes sure that whatever you're painting, it won't go outside that area that it's clipped onto. So if I were to take my brush and I were to try to paint outside the lines, it wouldn't paint anything because it's clipped onto just those colored layers. So that's a super helpful trick, especially if you are trying to paint highlights on the outer edges and you're like, oh no, I must get it perfectly within the lines, and you'll have to erase outside the lines and all this stuff. So layers in Photoshop are a savior. And as I'm doing these shadows, I felt like they were a bit too dark for my liking, so I just tweaked the opacity to see how dark I wanted these shadows to be. I did do hard cell. I like hard cell shadows for this style, for Rick and Morty. I think they do hard cell shadowing. Hard cell basically means like it's not airbrushed or anything. And when I do shadows, I just kind of do what looks good. Same with highlights. I do where they look good. I have a vague idea of a light source, but it's not always super spot on. I don't have any clear way of thinking on like how I, like, oh, if the light is here, then this highlight must be here, the shadow must be here. I don't think like that. It helps to definitely study that though, because there are certain areas where I will draw shadows and I'm like, well, yeah, this kind of makes sense that it would fall over here because it seems like light wouldn't hit here, etc., etc. So do study light sourcing and all that, especially for your paintings. It's amazing what it looks like when it looks close to realistic and when it's believable. So the more believable, the better. I did want to mention prior to this shading part that while I was filling in the initial color, layers. I did want to mention a little tip. Make sure you always color on white. Make sure you always color a dark color first, even if it's not the color that you're going for. Just lay in a really dark visible color, because if you don't, if you like, say for example, you like lay in some peach or yellow or something and it's bright against the white background, you'll notice later when you're working in more color and you're painting and you see all the colors like next to each other, you'll notice like spots that you didn't fill in. So what I like to do to ensure that there's no spots that I missed, I like to make sure that the color is dark enough to see to begin with, and then I'll change that specific layer. I'll lock the layer, alpha lock the layer, and then I'll change the color of that layer to the desired color, what I originally wanted. Just wanted to give that tip, because I did used to do that. Sometimes painting against a white background isn't even smart. Sometimes I'll actually change the background to another color so I can make sure that whatever I'm putting color, whatever color I'm putting in, it's filling in that entire area and I'm not missing a spot. I hope that makes sense. Over here, I am just filling in one circle and I'm just literally copying and pasting that color layer on to the next circle, and I am just adjusting the hue for each one, and I'm coloring the lines on these spheres because I kind of wanted to give it more dimension. Sometimes it helps to do different colored lines. I know illustrations kind of have a different feel when you do, like, instead of black lines, sometimes I'll see drawings where they'll do different colored lines for the skin or for the hair or whatever. And it just gives a different look and different vibe. It's a little bit softer and it gives a little bit more dimension. So yeah. So these 6 spheres actually represent 6 of the chakras. The hand is supposed to basically be the crown chakra, which I think is white or something. I just wanted that to like take place of the, crown chakra, and I wanted everything to be symmetrical and even, so I kept it at 6 chakras on each side and then left that one to be the crown chakra. Anyways, metaphysical crap. Over here, I am actually setting a layer style to each of the spheres, so that way it gives a consistent glow. I'm doing outer glow to each one, and I am adjusting each glow to each appropriate sphere. So the red sphere has a red glow, the orange sphere has an orange glow, the yellow one has a yellow glow, etc., etc. I just kind of wanted to make it look a little bit etheric. Is it the word etheric? I think that's the word. The word. Blah, blah, blah. I think that's the word. Go ahead and correct me if you want. I kind of wanted things to look a little bit more enchanting and magical. So you can actually copy layer styles if you don't want to like adjust each one to be exactly the same as before. You can just copy one layer style onto the next. So that's exactly what I did, and I just tweaked the colors of each one instead of like creating a new layer style and adjusting each setting and blah 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 blah. And over here I am drawing in little highlights and swirls of magic, I guess. I actually referenced the fart cloud in Rick and Morty. I actually cleaned that fart cloud, so I remember that fart cloud having these swirls in it. So I referenced that, and I adjusted the colors. I actually just did one, and you see I'm copying and pasting it, and I'm just adjusting the hue and saturation of each one to match the appropriate sphere. Sometimes I'll go to the color balance too, just so the colors work. So right here is actually a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. I don't intend to color this hand red. I just wanted to color it a bright color so I could see it pop from the white background. So I colored that red, and then I colored that another darker color. I don't intend to color that color. So yeah, this is a good example of what I was talking about. And then what I'm going to go in and do is go to each layer and alpha lock it and actually paint bucket tool in the color that I do want. And paint bucket tool is basically alt delete, like I said earlier. So when you have a layer on alpha lock and you want to change the color of that entire layer, you can just alpha lock it and then click alt delete, and it'll just change the color of that specific area rather than painting the entire canvas. So another little tip or trick, whatever, that I like to do when I color. And I intended for all these colors to actually pop out on a black background too, in case you wanted to print this out on a black t-shirt. Over here I was fiddling with the hand to see if I needed another dimension to it, like a layer style, to make it pop. But I ended up realizing that it was fine the way it was, so I just ended up leaving it alone. But it helps to see when someone is trying something and they don't like it, because you see someone's thought process that way, and you see them testing things out. Over here I just went to the shape tool, and then I picked this star blast burst thing, and I just wanted to have something behind him, just to make the composition a little bit more exciting and interesting. And you can see that I matched the color to the color in the eye just to keep things flowing and consistent. I don't want to add too many colors up in there and make it all crazy. I want it to somewhat flow and tie in together and make sense. See over here, I'm testing out that glow. I didn't end up liking that glow, so I took it out. But it helps to just test it out. And over here I duplicated him, and I was thinking of potentially doing like a reflection, like making it look like he's on water or some sort of surface like that, and decided not to do it. But that would have been a cool idea for another type of composition, I guess. And then for the final touch, I am typing in my name and the year, just so people know I did this. And I'm inserting it in a very discreet area, just so it blends in. So that is the final product. I apologize if the audio or the microphone was making some weird noises throughout this thing. I recorded this voiceover pretty late, and I didn't realize that my mic was making so many noises. I'll make sure that won't happen next time. But go ahead and comment down below any questions you may have, again, any steps that you may want me to go more in depth on for any kind of illustration, or any requests or anything, or just let me know how you liked this video. And go ahead and follow me on social media, on Tumblr, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to always save your work, guys, while you're working in Photoshop. And that's it. Have a good day, guys. Thank you for watching.